I'm going to take the liberty of asking a couple of questions myself, but I promise I will come to the audience as well. I'd like to go back to where you started from for a moment. You talked about how the private sector might be in a more variable market. You talked about, therefore, the growing importance of housing associations and local authorities. I think in a roundabout way, what you're talking about there is the expectation that social landlords will be building through the next recession, through if we end up with a no-deal Brexit.
No, we're not going to have a recession. Please, let's dispel that from the start.
For argument's sake, should we end up in a recession at some point, you're hoping that social landlords will be able to build through that. Now, a decade ago, for every pound that was put in by government, housing associations used to put in £2. We're now looking at more like £6. So the building of affordable housing is, by definition, more reliant on cross-subsidy, it's more reliant on borrowing. Given that fact, are you concerned about the ability of the social housing sector to be able to achieve your ambition and build through the next recession?
Well, it depends, right? So one of the traps that it's easy for us to fall into is to think that there is one housing market in the UK. And there aren't. There are a variety, dozens of different housing markets. There are probably 20 or 30 different markets in the capital alone. But within that envelope, it would be foolish not to keep grant rates under review if you want to maintain levels of activity. I mean, it's certainly the case that the housing association model of cross-subsidy from market sale means that they are less cyclical than they might otherwise have been. And so, we will be looking carefully at market dynamics to make sure that we are pitching subsidy correctly to maintain activity. As I say, my overriding target is 300,000. The private sector market is always, my entire adult life, the property market has varied, has fluctuated plus and minus because of demand and finance and sentiment and all these things. And I don't expect that to be different. Property has never been a kind of, in the long term, it has been a one-way bet, but in the medium term, less so. So we've got to stay flexible. And that's what I've been saying. I had a delegation from the G15 come to see me, sensitive about London in particular, and I said what I've just said to you, which is that we'd be foolish not to keep it under review.
Thank you. You talked about the importance of focusing on home ownership and people's aspirations to own their own home. We've had a couple of sets of figures coming out in the past week, and it looks as if the reinvigorated right to buy has certainly helped you to move in that direction. We have sold just shy of 21,000 social rented homes in the past year. We have built just shy of 6,500. Is that okay?
Well, it's not okay that we're missing the one-to-one replacement, no. Fundamentally, part of us taking the cap off the HRA is because we want to see a growing population of social rented homes, overall a growing population. As you know, we were consulting on flexibilities around the one-to-one replacement. We're still having a think about that and discussing it internally about what we might be able to do. But within the overall envelope now, we hope that if local authorities grasp the opportunity, notwithstanding the sales, and I do think sales are important, that we are able to see a growing population of social homes, given the various tools that are available. And of course, local authorities now can bid into the Affordable Homes Programme as well, if they want to, right? So there's a big funding pot there available for them too, and we'd be interested in looking at ambitious plans and aspirations that allow us to, as I say, grow the overall number.
You talked very powerfully about the importance of improving safety in housing. I wanted to ask you a little bit about sprinklers. This bit of a soapbox topic for us, but one that we feel is really important. Danny Cotton has said these can't be optional, they can't be nice to have, this is something that must happen. So far, you haven't put forward any funding to help make sure that happens. Is that going to change?
Well, what we've said is we're happy to have sensible conversations with people about the fire safety measures that they seek, right? So I'm not a fire safety expert, right? And if somebody comes to me and says, well, we think there's no other way to make this building safe than to put sprinklers in, then we would be foolish not, to acknowledge that. There is some difference of opinion, as I see it, about the efficacy of sprinklers, or about the need for sprinklers in certain building types, right? But fundamentally, we need to be guided by the fire safety expertise. And that's where the department is sitting. So if people have issues, if local authorities want to come forward, talk to us about the need to fit sprinklers, then we'll have an adult, sensible conversation with the primary concern being the safety of the occupants of the building. Right? That has to be our primary concern. And so it's an open invitation if people want to come. I mean, one of the things that would be, the humps we need to get over as well, certainly in new build, is embedding in people's ideas about a development that they should look at sprinklers. I mean, technology in sprinklers has changed a lot over the years. Certainly, there's a bit of resident resistance about retrofitting sprinklers because they think it's a great big pipe along the ceiling and one of those red things that spins around. And they also think that if somebody burns some toast further down the building, that the whole lot will be drenched in water, right? So there's an information campaign needed about what technology is there. There's an adult conversation needed about how we make buildings safe, and we're open to both those things.
Lovely. Two very quick questions. One here and one on the front row there. This gentleman here and the lady there. We'll take both questions yeah, you first.
Thank you. Brian Horton, I'm the housing advisor to the South East LEP. And in the South East Local Enterprise Partnership, accelerating housing delivery as being a priority since our inception. We're a business-led partnership, and when we talk to business, one of the things they share with us is that we need to help SME builders to do more. Mm-hmm. I wonder, as Minister, what you think you can do to help SMEs to help you deliver some of those 300,000 homes?
Yeah, this is a totally critical issue. The crash wiped out about 50% of SME builders. They just disappeared and they haven't re-emerged. Plus, the nature of regulation in the house building market means there are massive barriers to entry to people coming in. We're very focused on this issue. So I guess 3 areas. First of all is finance. Lots of SME builders don't have a balance sheet that allows them to expand particularly quickly. So getting them over the 50% loan to cost barrier that banks put in place is key. You might have seen a few weeks ago, 3 months ago, we launched a new fund with Barclays, £1 billion focused on SME builders, and there will be more, hopefully, funding coming through that will help them. We've got, Homes England are in a position now to help with Small Sites Fund and accelerated construction funds and all sorts of stuff. So we can give them access to finance. The second area is access to land, because they're obviously competing. I mean, they're more agile and nimble and able to do smaller sites. And again, we've configured funding to help them with smaller sites. But certainly looking at the Letwin review and the model he's proposing of a kind of master developer with smaller developers underneath and builders who basically get land on performance looks like an interesting one for SMEs. And then the third area, which I think is a really promising area, is of course technology. So we've got £2.5 billion effectively devoted towards more technology in building, off-site manufacture, different types of manufacture. And this removes an enormous area of risk for small builders. And we're seeing just starting to emerge, a new breed of developers who are now a bit more like film producers, right? They can put the finance together and the housing product together, which comes entirely made. They don't have to deal with subcontractors and all to get. So the only risk for them is in the ground, right? And they can de-risk some of that too. So if we can use technology to remove some of the barriers to entry, then hopefully we'll see a new generation. I keep saying to people, I would love to see a new Laurie Barrett emerge, right? He was an estate agent who thought he could do a better job and market it better, bought himself a helicopter, and is now, a generation later, the biggest house builder in the country. And we definitely need that talent to come through, and we're trying where we can to help.
Thank you.
Minister, you mentioned safety as an aspect. So do you think it makes sense to have new housing developments without any pavements in the design for pedestrian access? We'd like you to meet somebody in Cornwall whose home lives adjoining to a new development that is without pavement access.
Well, I of course, be more than happy to meet people. But what I would say to you is I constantly try and avoid the temptation of sitting in my office in Whitehall and deciding what is appropriate in Carlisle or in Norwich or in Hastings. Right? Fundamentally, what we want to try and do is to encourage people on the front line of development and housing, whether that's developers, local authorities, or property managers, to realize that they are primarily responsible for safety, and that it is their duty to satisfy themselves that what they are doing, producing, managing is safe. Right now, there's a tendency in those risk environments to try and push the risk upwards. Nothing to do with me, Gov. And this is part of the culture change that I was talking about, right? Frontline operatives, participants have to realize that safety must be embedded in everything that they do, right? So I can't say on that particular development whether it's appropriate or not. There are some developments where a kind of, and it might be an inflammatory word, shared space approach might actually be safer, a calming from a traffic point of view. Certainly if you want a play street or something like that, right? So, but it's not for me to decide. All I can do is give local authorities and people at the front end the tools to make sure that they can satisfy themselves that what they're doing is safe.
Minister, could I also then, you've had the 3 pillars of what you really see the vision for Britain, but I think what we're looking for, the vision has to also truly include accessibility into this. Housing estates without pavements that children can't walk on to get to their houses, housing estates without pavements that blind people can't safely navigate to get to their houses, or for wheelchair people to be away from those roads. We seriously have to look at accessibility. We have to look at the housing stock. The numbers that you predicted are phenomenal, but if people can't actually fundamentally live in there with a disability, we really need to relook, and we need to challenge people in this room and come together and work out how we're going to build Britain. Are we going to build Britain that is inclusive and includes everybody? And we have to get away from the minimum standards. We saw you in front of the inquiry, and we really want to challenge the industry to win hearts and minds, to think we have to have these homes, not just 10%, not just 15%. We want them all accessible.
Thank you very much for the challenge. I'm going to have to just pause us there. Did you want to come back for just a very brief comment?
It's a very fair point. And one of the things we've said in the MPPF, the new planning thing, is that local authorities need to think not just about how many, but what kind of housing they need in their area, and that they now have the powers through the planning system almost basically to guide and mandate the mix of dispositions and tenures and types of housing that they need. I mean, one of the things that I'm quite keen to see encouraged is what they politely call senior living, right? So it's basically semi-supported housing for older people that addresses some of the accessibility problems that you pointed out for people who are going to live there for the last quarter of their lives and may have mobility and other issues, right? This is a market that hasn't really stimulated so far. There are a couple of kind of premium developers there, but we need to see more of that. People say to me constantly wherever I go, where have all the bungalows gone? Right now, bungalows not a terribly efficient use of land, but it's a proxy for something. It's where can I go in my old age when I might have different requirements, right? So, but fundamentally, as I say, I can't sit in my office and say, you need 1,200 of these in Carlisle, and you need 50 in Doncaster, and you need all this. It has to be at the front end in local authorities through their plan. And that's what we're trying to achieve.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Terribly sorry to cut off the debate. I'm afraid the Minister is
I've got to go to another hall to answer questions.
So he's going to be travelling just down the hallway. So if you would like to hear more from the Minister, and if you'd like to hear more specifically on shared ownership, please follow him, Pied Piper style. He will be just down at the other end of the hall in about 2 minutes. Thank you very much indeed. Can we thank the Minister for his